Welcome to the International Burch University podcast. The Department of Digital Communications and Public Relations, or DCPR, is home to the IBU podcast studio. I'm Engin Obucic, your host today. As part of an academic visit from the University of Malaga, planned within the Work Package 5 of Erasmus Plus Capacity Building in Higher Education program, our topic today is the transformation of architecture and civil engineering education towards a sustainable model. We are joined by Associate Professor Jonathan Ruiz Jaramillo from the Higher Technical School of Architecture, University of Malaga. Professor Jaramillo is currently visiting the Department of Architecture at the International Burch University. Professor Jaramillo, welcome.
Thank you.
Is this your first? Let me ask you this: would this be your first time in Sarajevo? Your first visit to Sarajevo?
Mm-hmm.
What are your first impressions about the city as an architect?
As an architect. Okay, thank you so much for the greeting. My first impression of Sarajevo is that, like an architect, my vision of architect, it's that it's easy to understand how you are. I mean, it is a very linear city, and in not so much time, you get quickly the habit to how to move around the city and to identify the different spaces in the city. You know? And about that, I was so interested about the contrast that you can find in several places of the city. You know, the contrast between old center and the hills around. You know, the architecture completely changed in meters, really. And then you move out of the old city and start in another completely different space, no? With other different distribution and buildings, etc. No? And that is something that it was really interesting for me.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you caught with an architectural eye, something of interest to you in the city?
For example, one thing that I liked so much is that really the city is in the valley. Mm-hmm. And then from each part of the city, you can see the hills and the green hills. No? Mm-hmm. And this, for example, from the architecture point of view, something that you have to be too careful. Mm-hmm. To trade carefully, no? Because, for example, in Malaga, no, with the touristification, the hills around the city are starting to completely occupied by homes, by constructions. No? And that is something that I started to see in some points of Sarajevo. And I think it's maybe from a foreigner point of view that something that has to be protected. No? How? Because when you are in the city and you see from the valley the hills, you have to. It is something like relaxing. No? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's from the point of view of the people who live the city, it is an expanse of the space. No? These green mountains around the city.
Speaking of Malaga, would you please tell us more about yourself? You know, what are your personal and professional interests? As you know, we would like to find out more about you. So, please feel free. You know, also to talk about the courses that you teach at your university, mm-hmm. and the likes of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and really, I teach in Malaga in the Department of Architecture, and I teach in the Bachelor of Architecture and the Master Degree of Architecture. I teach usually related with steel, wooden, and masonry structures, so more related to the technical part of the architecture. But really, I'm very adaptable, and usually I help my colleagues in another courses when it's necessary. And for example, I have teach also in, for example, calculation and design of electrical system or prefabrication of buildings. Whatever if I can help, I can teach another courses. No, but in my expertise is related to the structural courses. No. In the Master of Architecture, for example, I teach also about energy efficiency and how you take into account this energy efficiency in the design of the buildings. On the other hand, I'm responsible at this moment I'm the academic coordinator of the Master of Architecture. And from the research point of view, I'm interested in, and at this moment, I'm leading a project about a design of a sustainable material. We are creating like a new composite, mixing fibers, natural fibers, and we are working with trying to look for an sustainable adhesive to mix these fibers, these natural fibers, and to avoid the traditional ones based on phenolics or polyester resins. Also, my PhD is related to the seismic vulnerability of heritage, and that is another field of research I'm interested.
You're currently cooperating with the International Burch University. How did that cooperation come about? What are the touch points between yourself, your university, the University of Malaga, and IBU?
The first point was that we established contact with the TASISM project, and working on the different packages, we started to make an interesting contact, and that was because during our relationships during the project, I was really interested to come to Sarajevo, because the International Burch University was really an important. Really an important part of the project, and they were really active during the project, and I was so interested to come here and to see how you are doing all the things. For example, to be more specific, we started to establish contact during the work package 2. It was related to spaces and equipment for teaching. And after that, we met on a meeting last year in Yerevan, in Armenia. But the main point of contact was during the summer school that took place in Malaga last year, where during 2 weeks, two intense weeks, the teachers could establish a very nearby contact, and we established very good relationships. During these 2 weeks, we started to speak about the teaching process, the methodologies, the innovations on teaching and learning process of the students. And that was the final point that decided to me if I had the opportunity to come to Sarajevo, I will come.
My understanding is you're already involved in teaching at the International Burch University. In what capacity are you involved? Have you already delivered lectures at IBU? What type of lectures, or what is the plan in that regard?
And for the moment, I was in the Architecture Structures 3 course. They were working with wooden, and like I told you before, wooden structures is one of my main interest, and really I teach about that in Malaga, and I could establish this relationship between the subject there in Malaga and here in Sarajevo. After that, I have today. We have another meeting, another lecture in the Architectural Structure 1 course. And I will try to explain the students how the structure design has to be related with the design, the whole design of the building, and establish a compulsory relationship between these two things. The structure is not another thing that makes an engineer, a civil engineer, and give you and you introduce in the project. No, it's something that you have to take into account when you start to design from the beginning of that, because if not, you will feel some problems during the construction, or even after the construction. And that is a point that I will explain to the students today. And after that, the rest of the time, I had time to visit the city, but also I had some conversations with the professor here in International Burch University about these innovation methodologies and how the students could better learn the concepts, no, because the influence of social media today is something that maybe have to take into account in the teaching process.
Since you're teaching courses in structural architecture at your department, what would you say to IBU students, and how would that differ from your own department or your own university? I mean, what are the differences, the similarities and differences between your department back at University of Malaga and here at IBU? How does that work?
From the teaching point of view, I don't feel that there are so many differences, because really I felt that we have a lot of common points. No, even for example, in the course Architectural Structure 3 where I was on Monday, I feel that the students are so close to the teachers. Even the teacher knows the students by their names, no? And that is something that we do also in Malaga, because the personal contact between students and teachers is for us is so important. No? But apart of that, speaking about the way of we teach, really, I think that it's not related for the teaching way, but for the degree, really. Because, for example, in our degree we have 5 courses and then the master. So, and we have, I think, more time in the bachelor, no? And these 5 courses in the bachelor, from the structure point of view, we have structured courses from the first one to the 5th one, and the students go very deep into the design of structural concepts and even the calculations. Sometimes in Spain, the architects are in an intermediate point from the typical or traditional role of architect in other countries, and civil engineer. Really, architects in Spain sometimes works as civil engineers, making calculations, even electrical calculations of plumbing, or with a lot of things. No? And with this learning of the students, I think this difference is from the bachelor design, and not for the way that we are teaching. No? Because really, I felt that is really close.
I understand you've been involved in that season project for quite a long time, and this wouldn't be the first time or your first involvement in the project. Would you please tell us more about the project and other ways in which you were involved so far? Because this is fascinating. I mean, how the inter-university cooperation, the different projects that you're conducting right now, the one with the IBU, it certainly is generating value at many levels. And I'm certain that there have been other ways that you participated in the project.
I started to participate in the work package 2. And it was related to the equipment and the spaces where the teaching is produced. No? And that is my first participation. It was not so much complicated, but after this participation in the work package 2, I started to go deeper, and I was really involved during the creation of the summer school the last year in Malaga, and also in the work package 6. I'm working, for example, as external reviewer with the non-European universities, no, that are involved in the project, and also I was working hard during the design of the new methodologies, no, of an innovation processes, no, that tried to be applied during this summer school last year in Malaga, and also in the creation of new courses. In the project, in Tassim's project, one of the points that was the non-European universities has to modernize some courses or design or redesign new courses at bachelor level or master level to establish more relationship with European universities, no, and it depends of the market needs, and that was one of my first interest of in this project. Not try to cooperate and collaborate, giving my opinion or my vision about these new courses or these courses that had to be modernized and giving some advices, no, about the possibilities of the course of these courses or new courses could have. No?
I personally had a privilege to participate in Erasmus Plus similar programs, totally. Erasmus Mobility, and I found it to be very useful. It seems to me that value gets generated at all levels. Really, it's kind of each individual, each participant gets an opportunity to learn about the counterpart, the other university, to meet the staff. So there's people-to-people links definitely at that initial level. And then, the deeper you get into the technical details, say if it's curriculum development or if it's relationship development or if it's business relationship development or university to university development, there is really so much to share because each university it's very specific, it's very special in its own rank, in its own way. And this is to be seen and it's to be considered as wealth. A wealth of experience, a wealth of information. And when you join this together, it becomes a touch point at which value gets generated. And I found it very useful and very practical because as universities share their mutual experience or when they share experiences from their history and the current market conditions, it's simply they generate some sort of synergy that gets its competitive edge. And when universities act together, there's a certain competitiveness, a competitive edge that comes out of it, as an outcome that results from it. And I'm really, I've been highly impressed personally with this. And as you were sharing, I kept thinking about it. And so it's a really great initiative that this is happening, and it certainly should continue that way. Which brings me to the question of a professional architect in this context, the context of architecture we are reflecting from. What is the role? And since European, let's put it this way: since European universities are becoming more competitive as they engage in experience sharing, they become more competitive at the EU and international markets, which is very important. Acting together, they sort of build up this competitiveness. What is the role of a professional architect in this context? In other words, or let's see it this way, do universities produce competent architects or rather architects that can meet market needs? What's your experience with this? I'm sure you can tell us a lot about it.
It's a very good point, a very good question. We intend to do it. No? We are trying to produce best architects as possible and give them the competence to get into the market with all the success, of course. But it's not an easy task, not really, because the market is really changing a lot. And that's because that is very challenging for teachers, no? That to prepare the students for the future. No? But if, for example, in our experience in Malaga, for example, in the Master of Architecture, at this moment we have a problem because the students are not focused on the final thesis project because they are everyone working. So they are not finished the master, and they are already working.
Does that mean that you're doing a great job?
Or maybe the market necessity, not true. But that is a good point, no? And I think we are really happy, but that is a challenging point too, and that demand and are really demanding in time and in effort of the teacher, but not in Malaga. No, I think in the statistics, if you see it now in the market, I think that is absorbing a lot of architects, and that is because the complete learning the students receive. I think one of the main points of the architects that are is the complete formation they receive, because they are prepared for many different topics: energy efficiency, construction design, structure design. Of course, you can acquire the role of traditional architect, no, to design building and this. But if you can go to, you can afford a lot of different jobs. Even in our experience in Malaga, we have one student that is making a film director. And the architecture learning, he has obtained from this a different vision that has given him to obtain some prizes even, no, in some festivals, cinema festival in Spain, no? And or for example to designing the surroundings, the graphics of video games, or for example. For interior design, no? A lot of different fields that the architects, if they are well prepared, can afford with not so much work. And I think that is the challenge that teachers has in this context, no? To prepare the students to afford these different jobs that they can to obtain. Or for example, I have another student that is working designing websites, for example, no, and all the learning about composition, colors, and designing, even the structure. Even they change the structure of the concrete, but the structure of the website, no, and that's the reason, because an architecture student can afford a lot of fields. It's like I say, challenging, but teachers, and that is if you like your profession, I think it's very interesting too. No, it is something that you learn every day too. No? To transmit this knowledge to your students.
Speaking of which, it seems that. Educational methodologies, students, education itself has changed in the past several years, and it keeps changing, especially with the advent of AI and other tools. What's your opinion on that? Of that, how do you see it? Has education really changed? Have students changed? Are methodologies different? Teaching methodologies different? How do you see that?
In my opinion, we have not lose that. We have to keep in mind that IT is a tool, just a tool, and a tool cannot change completely the way the students are learning and the way you are teaching them. I mean, the innovation has to take into consideration these tools, these important tools, because using them, you are more nearby your students. But I feel that there is an opinion now that some people try to change, for example, the traditional way of learning, for example, eliminating exams, or trying to introduce that the learning is is easy, and you can make this learning without any effort, and this is a kind of thing that I not so much agree with, no, because learning is a process, and maybe the educators, we have to be between the IT innovations, because there are tools, and it is useful to introduce in our way of learning, of teaching, sorry. But you cannot also lose the point of view that the traditional lectures, for example, has some good points for the students. I was watching a conference not so much time ago, and there are now a typical system of learning that is the problem-based learning. No, you give students a problem. Okay, if you use the knowledge of the course, you can solve the problems. And this person say that okay, the mathematical how was it was like the differential calculation, it was developed around 2000 years. So you cannot give to a student a problem-based learning and okay, design this calculation. It's not easy. It is you finish quickly if you explain that to your student. And that is something that I'm feeling with my student. I sometimes make this type of test. I give my students a problem. Okay, I don't explain nothing. You have all the information here, and okay, look for the solution. This is a typical new way to teach.
So it's outcome based.
But students always are shocked because they have not the tools to solve the problem. So it is better use the lecture, explain the concepts, then the student has the tools and they had to afford the problem. Which I try to say that it is compulsory for us to relate the traditional way of learning and traditional way of teaching with the new one, and try to introduce the innovative method, the tools, when it is necessary, but not substitute the old one or the traditional one just because they are traditional. That's
a brilliant example that you've just provided with differential equations, because it seems to me a lot of people think, that the sum of all knowledge that the society has generated so far throughout its history, somehow ceases to exist because we have developed new tools, we have developed new, say, AI, we have developed new ways of dealing or solving issues. It seems that people think that, everything else that we've got in the past seems to have ceased to exist, which is a fallacy, which is clearly not the case. And as you correctly pointed out, differential equations have been around for 2000 years. Nothing new has been invented in that regard. What we did come up, though, with the new tools to make it faster, to do the calculations faster. But the basics, the base knowledge remains the same, intact. For example, if we were to invent new laws of physics, would that mean that, and Michio Kaku was reflecting on this recently on a podcast as well, would the existing laws of physics cease to exist if we were to invent something new? Of course not. The existing laws of physics would continue to exist and would be applicable in the same manner, the same way that we're applying them now. But if there is something new, that new law of physics would probably be applicable to something else, to a new quantity or a new property, whatever the case may be, meaning that the existing laws of physics remain the same, intact. And we build on what we have developed so far, on the entire corpus of knowledge. That's very important to differentiate. So thank you for that point, Professor. And also, when we kind of look at the project in its totality, what do you think is the greatest benefit? What's the benefit that you would highlight about the Season project and the project you're involved with at the moment?
From my point of view, I think the best point of the project is the relationship established between all members of the team, between the European universities and the non-European universities. In my case, for example, I feel that this relationship gives us a new point of view about the teaching around all the European continent. In my case, from east to west, and that is very interesting because now, with all the relationship between the teams, Armenian, Bosnian, Slovenian, Spanish, Italian. And all the benefits, or the main benefits, in my opinion, of the project is these relationships between students also, but the teachers too. No? And these relationships, I think, gives you an opportunity to understand how architects are learning and preparing for the market in all the countries and along the Europe, and it is funny because sometimes you see that there are not so much differences between the countries, but sometimes it is interesting to know more about some small differences that could be, in teaching or even the way the architects are working in the different countries, and it is very rich because you learn a lot, and this learning you can apply then to your day by day work. And for me, for example, is the best point, this learning, because for me the interesting, I can give some things for the project, but always I usually say that I'm learning continuously. I'm learning from my students every day, and doing this work, during this travel to Sarajevo, and I think the best thing is the learning that maybe unconsciously the people of the project acquire working together.
This has been very insightful, both insightful and informative, Professor, and I'd like to really thank you for that. Thank you for tuning in. I'm very happy that we've had an opportunity to speak with Professor Jaramillo, and I believe that it has been highly instructive to all of us. So thank you for tuning in. This has been the International Burch University, the IBU podcast. The Department of Digital Communications and Public Relations is home to the IBU podcast studio. Thank you.